The silence on the 42nd floor was not a peaceful one. It was the pressurized, expensive silence of a ticking clock. At Vane and Associates, time wasn't just money, it was a religion, and Sarah Vane was its high priestess. She stood at her floor-to-ceiling window, the skyline of the city shimmering like a sea of jagged diamonds. But her reflection in the glass was what caught her eye. She looked sharp, polished, and entirely alone. She turned her gaze to the bullpen. It was 6:45 p.m. Most of the junior associates were hunched over their monitors, fueled by artisanal espresso and the desperate hope of a year-end bonus. But one desk was already being cleared with a surgical, haunting precision. Elias Thorne. He was the firm's silent engine. He was the man who could deconstruct a failing hedge, funds data architecture in his sleep, and rebuild it by dawn. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost accidental, thick dark hair that he forgot to style, a jawline that suggested a stubborn strength, and eyes that were a deep, tired slate gray. But Elias Thorne was a ghost in a suit. He arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, he produced 3 times the output of his peers, and at 5 p.m., regardless of deadlines, disasters, or corporate birthdays, he vanished. "He's doing it again," a voice drawled from behind Sarah. It was Marcus, a senior partner who wore his ambition like a loud cologne. "The man is a machine, Sarah, but he's a machine with a kill switch. We're in the middle of the Sterling merger, and he's packing his bag like he's got a flight to catch every single day." Sarah didn't look away from Elias. "His work is perfect, Marcus." "Better than yours." "Sure, it's perfect," Marcus sneered. "But he's not a team player. He never stays for the scotch. He never joins the weekend retreats. The guys in the pit call him the monk. Word is, he hasn't been on a date since his wife passed 4 years ago. It's unnatural. It's like he's waiting for a promotion to heaven instead of vice president." Sarah felt a flicker of irritation. It wasn't just Marcus's arrogance. It was her own curiosity, a dormant, nagging thing that Elias Thorne had awakened weeks ago. She prided herself on knowing people, knowing their price, their weaknesses, their desires, but Elias Thorne had no price. He didn't want more money. He never asked for a raise, despite being overdue for one. He didn't want fame. He seemed to want nothing from the world but the right to leave it at 5 o'clock. "Leave us, Marcus," Sarah said. She waited until Marcus retreated, then she stepped out of her office. The click of her stilettos on the marble floor was like a countdown. Elias didn't look up as she approached, but she saw his shoulders subtly tense. He was sliding a sleek, black laptop into a leather bag that had seen better decades. "Elias," she said. It wasn't a question. "Sarah," he replied. He finally looked up. His expression was a fortress, perfectly professional, entirely impenetrable. "I'm just finishing the risk assessment for the morning. It's already on your server. I saw it's impeccable. Which is why I find it so baffling that you're leaving when the rest of the team is ordering dinner to the conference room." She leaned against the edge of his desk, a power move designed to make him feel small. It didn't work. He simply stood up, towering over her, his presence calm and grounded. "My work is done, Sarah. I believe my contract specifies 40 hours and I've already given you 55 this week." "Contracts are for people who want to stay where they are," she countered, her voice dropping to a smooth, persuasive honey. "Partnerships are for people who go the extra mile. There's a celebration tonight at the Gilded Lily. Everyone who matters will be there. The board, the Sterling family, and a certain vice president from our London branch who specifically asked if the man behind the Thorne Analytics would be attending. She's brilliant, Elias, and if I may be so bold, she's exactly your type." Elias didn't blink. "I don't have a type, Sarah. Because you don't have a life," she snapped, her frustration finally boiling over. "Look at you. You're 34 years old. You're in the prime of your career, you're one of the most eligible men in this building, and you live like a Victorian widower in a bell jar. Why won't you date? Why won't you let a woman into that life of yours? It's been 4 years. Grief has an expiration date, Elias. At some point it just becomes an excuse to stop living." The air in the bullpen seemed to freeze. A few associates looked up, their eyes wide. It was a cruel thing to say, and Sarah knew it the moment the words left her mouth. She expected him to flinch. She expected him to get angry, to defend his honor, or perhaps to walk out and never come back. Instead, Elias Thorne did something far more unsettling. He smiled. It was a small, sad, knowing smile that made Sarah feel like a child lecturing a professor. "You think this is about grief?" he asked softly. "What else could it be?" Sarah challenged. "You're a young man in the world's most vibrant city, and you spend your nights, what? Watching reruns? Eating over a sink? You're wasting your best years on a ghost." Elias slung his bag over his shoulder. He looked at the clock on the wall, 6:58 p.m. A flash of genuine panic crossed his face, the first crack in his armor she had ever seen. "You think I'm hiding?" Elias said, his voice low and intense. "You think I'm choosing a monk's life because I'm afraid of the world? You think my life is empty because it doesn't look like yours, filled with loud restaurants and people who only love you for your title? I think you're lonely, Elias, and I think you're using your daughter as a shield to keep the world at bay," Sarah said, doubling down on her psychological warfare. Elias walked around his desk until he was inches from her. She could smell the faint scent of cedarwood and the sharp, metallic tang of his third cup of black coffee. "My daughter is not a shield, Sarah. She is the world. And if you think my life is empty, then you have no idea what the word full actually means." He checked his watch again. "I have exactly 12 minutes to get to the other side of the city. If I'm late, she thinks I've forgotten." "And I never, ever forget?" Sarah scoffed, though her heart was racing. 12 minutes? In this traffic? "You're proving my point, Elias. You're a slave to a routine that's killing your potential. Come to the party, give yourself 2 hours of freedom. I'll even have my driver take you home afterward." Elias looked at her, really looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. He saw the expensive jewelry, the cold office, and the woman who thought freedom was a cocktail party. "You really want to know why I won't date?" he asked. "You really want to see the burden you think I'm carrying?" "I want to understand why a man like you is choosing to be invisible," she replied. "Fine," Elias said, his voice turning to steel. "My car is in the garage, level 3. I'm leaving in 60 seconds. If you want the answer, you come with me now." "But I don't wait for anyone. Not even the CEO." He didn't wait for her answer. He turned and strode toward the elevators with a purpose that made the efficient shadow look like a man on fire. Sarah stood frozen for a heartbeat. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from the London VP asking when they'd arrive at the Lily. She looked at the office she had spent 15 years building, then at the retreating back of the only man who had ever looked at her with pity. She grabbed her coat and ran. The descent into the parking garage was a blur of concrete and silence. Elias moved with a terrifying economy of motion, his footsteps echoing like gunshots against the low-hanging pipes. Sarah struggled to keep pace in her 4-inch heels, her breath hitching in the damp, subterranean air. This was a man she had managed for 3 years, a man whose performance reviews she had signed with a detached sense of satisfaction, yet as he unlocked a sensible silver SUV that dented at the bumper and littered with a stray car seat in the back, she realized she didn't know him at all. "Get in," he said. It wasn't an invitation, it was a deadline. As they pulled out of the garage, the city of Chicago was a gridlock of glowing brake lights and frustrated horns. The rain had turned from a drizzle into a rhythmic drumming against the windshield. Elias didn't turn on the radio. He didn't offer small talk. He drove with a white-knuckled intensity, his eyes darting to the dashboard clock every 30 seconds. "You're going to give yourself a heart attack, Elias," Sarah said, trying to reclaim her usual air of authority. "It's just a daycare. They aren't going to put her on the curb if you're 5 minutes late. I pay for the best corporate childcare subsidies in the city. They're used to late parents. It's not just a daycare," Elias replied, his voice vibrating with a hidden frequency. "And it's not about the teachers. It's about the promise." He took a sharp turn, cutting through a narrow alleyway to bypass the main artery of the interstate. Sarah gripped the door handle. "What promise?" "The promise that I will be the one constant," he said. "When the accident happened, when Claire died, Maya was 3. She spent 2 months in a pediatric ICU. Every time she woke up, she asked for her mother. And every time, I had to be the one to tell her that Mommy wasn't coming. After a while, she stopped asking for Claire. She started asking, 'Are you staying?' Elias navigated a lane change with aggressive precision. I told her yes, every single time. I am staying, Maya. I will be there when you wake up, and I will be there when you finish school. If I'm late, Sarah, that promise cracks. And I don't let things crack. Sarah felt a cold lump form in her throat. She thought of her own life, the 3 ex-husbands who had drifted away like smoke, the assistants who handled her dry cleaning, the empty penthouse that smelled only of expensive candles and solitude. She had always equated reliability with a high-functioning Excel sheet. To Elias, it was a lifeline. The neighborhood changed rapidly. The towering glass of the Loop gave way to the weathered brick of the West Side. Here, the streetlights flickered, and the shops had iron grates over the windows. They pulled up to a squat, cheerful-looking building painted in primary colors. The Starlight Care Center. We're 2 minutes late, Elias muttered, killing the engine. He didn't wait for her. He was out of the door before the chime of the keys had stopped. Sarah followed, her silk coat getting dampened by the rain. Inside, the lobby smelled of floor wax and apple juice. The walls were covered in finger-painted masterpieces and charts tracking the height of children who were growing too fast for their clothes. At the end of the hallway, sitting on a small, molded plastic chair that was meant for someone much smaller, was a girl. She was beautiful, with Elias's dark hair and a complexion like porcelain. But it was her posture that struck Sarah. She wasn't playing with the toys scattered nearby. She wasn't watching the cartoon playing on the wall-mounted TV. She was staring at the door. Her small hands were gripped tight around the ears of a stuffed rabbit whose fur had been loved into matted clumps. When Elias stepped into the room, the transformation was violent. The girl didn't just smile. Her entire body seemed to galvanize. "Daddy!" She didn't spring up. Instead, she began a slow, methodical process of bracing herself. She used the armrests of the chair to heave her torso upward. Sarah's breath caught as she saw the glint of metal and Velcro, a heavy, sophisticated orthopedic brace that ran from the girl's left hip down to her shoe. Maya moved with a hitching, swinging gait, her body leaning heavily to the right to compensate for the stubbornness of her left leg. It was a laborious, exhausting way to travel across 20 feet of linoleum. Elias stood perfectly still. He didn't run to her. He didn't pick her up halfway. He stood at the finish line with his arms open, his face a mask of pride and encouragement. "You're doing it, Peanut," he whispered. "Strong steps. Eyes on me." When she finally reached him, she collapsed into his knees, and Elias swept her up into his arms, burying his face in her hair. For a moment, the high-powered senior analyst disappeared. He was just a man holding his world. Elias turned to Sarah. "Maya, this is Sarah. She's the boss at the big office." Maya peered at Sarah with eyes that were too old for a 6-year-old. "Does she make you stay late?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. She felt the weight of every just one more hour email she had sent Elias over the last 3 years. "No, honey," Sarah said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Not anymore." Elias took Maya to the cubby to grab her backpack, leaving Sarah with the evening supervisor, a woman named Mrs. Gable, who wore a permanent look of weary kindness. "He's a saint, that man," Mrs. Gable whispered to Sarah. "Most of the parents here. They're stressed, they're rushing, they're complaining about the late fees. Not Mr. Thorne. He's here for every physical therapy session we host. He's the one who researched the new aquatic therapy center in the suburbs. He works that fancy job of his just to afford the surgeries." "Maya's had 3 and 4 years?" Sarah looked at the girl. "She seems so happy." "She is," Mrs. Gable nodded, "because she's the only thing that matters to him. But sometimes I look at him and wonder who's taking care of the caretaker, you know? He's pouring everything into her cup. His own is bone dry," Elias returned, Maya perched on his hip. "We have therapy in 20 minutes, he said to Sarah. "You can take an Uber from here, or you can come see the rest of the empty life I lead." "I'm coming with you," Sarah said. They drove to a specialized clinic 10 miles away. The waiting room was filled with the sound of whirring machines and the occasional cry of a child in pain. For the next hour, Sarah watched through a glass partition as Elias participated in Maya's session. He wasn't just sitting on the sidelines, he was on the floor. He was the one holding Maya's waist as she tried to balance on a giant foam ball. He was the one singing silly songs to distract her when the therapist stretched the tight muscles in her leg until she whimpered. Elias was sweating, his expensive dress shirt clung to his back and his tie was tossed over a chair. He looked exhausted, yet there was an intensity in his gaze that Sarah had never seen in the boardroom. In the office, Elias was a man who calculated risks. Here, he was a man who defied them. When the session ended, Maya was spent. She fell asleep in the car before they had even cleared the parking lot. Elias drove to a small, quiet park that overlooked the pond. He turned off the engine and sat in the dark, the only light coming from the dashboard and the distant glow of the city he had abandoned for the evening. "Now you know," Elias said, his voice a low rumble. "I know she's a beautiful little girl, Elias, and I know you're a devoted father, but—" Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "That doesn't answer the question. It explains why you're busy. It doesn't explain why you've closed the door to everything else. There are women who would understand this. Women who would want to help you." Elias leaned his head back against the headrest. "You think I haven't tried? You think I'm some martyr who enjoys the silence?" He reached into the glove box and pulled out a small laminated photograph. It was a woman with the same bright eyes as Maya, laughing on a beach. "Claire, about 18 months ago, I met someone," Elias said. "A nurse at the hospital. She was wonderful. Smart, patient, and she knew the medical world. I thought, maybe we went on 4 dates. I felt like a human being again. I felt like Elias, not just Maya's dad or the analyst." He took a jagged breath. "On the 5th date, I brought her home. I wanted her to meet Maya. It was a Saturday afternoon. Maya was having a bad day, her muscles were spasming, she was frustrated, she was crying. The house was a mess of medical supplies and specialized toys. What happened?" Sarah asked. "I saw the look on her face," Elias said, and the pain in his voice made Sarah want to look away. It wasn't disgust. It was a very quiet, very polite kind of horror. She stayed for an hour. She was perfectly nice to Maya, but when I walked her to her car, she didn't look at me. She said, "Elias, you're an incredible man, truly, but I'm 30 years old and I want a life that's light. I want to travel. I want to be someone's priority, and I realized tonight that I will never be your priority. I'll always be third, behind your grief and your daughter's disability." Elias looked at Sarah, his eyes raw. She was right. I didn't hate her for it, I envied her. She had the luxury of choosing a light life. My life is heavy. It's heavy with braces and surgeries and the fear of what happens to Maya if I'm not here. I realized then that dating isn't just a drink at a bar for me. It's an invitation into a war zone. He gestured to the sleeping girl in the back. Maya is just starting to trust the world again. She's just starting to believe that people don't just disappear. I can't bring a woman into her life, let her love that woman, and then watch that woman realize the burden is too much and walk away. I won't let Maya be too much for anyone ever again. If that means I spend my nights alone, then that's the price I pay to keep her heart intact." Sarah looked out at the rain. For the first time in her life, the Gilded Lily party seemed like a collection of ghosts in expensive suits. She looked at her hands, manicured, soft, never having held a child through a muscle spasm or balanced a life on a single paycheck. "I called your life empty," Sarah whispered. "I was wrong. My life is the one that's empty. It's just very, very shiny." Elias didn't offer a platitude. He just nodded. "The reason I won't date, Sarah, isn't because I don't want love. It's because I'm already giving every ounce of love I have to a girl who needs it more than I need a companion. I'm not the monk, I'm a father. And in my world, that's all there's room for." The silence that followed wasn't the pressurized silence of the 42nd floor. It was the heavy, honest silence of a truth finally told. The drive back to the city was different. The silence that had once been a wall between them was now a bridge. Sarah looked out the window as the skyline reappeared. Its glowing spires no longer looking like trophies of success, but like the cold, jagged teeth of a machine that demanded everything and gave back nothing but paper wealth. "You can drop me at the corner of 5th, Sarah said softly as they entered the loop. "I'll take a cab to the Lily." Elias nodded, his hands relaxed on the steering wheel for the first time that night. "You're still going?" "I have to," Sarah said, but for the first time in a decade she didn't want to. I'm the host. But I won't be staying for the scotch, Elias. I think I've had enough of the high life for one evening. As she stepped out of the SUV, she paused. She looked at the sleeping girl in the back, then at the man who was her most valuable employee and her most profound teacher. Elias? Yes? I'm sorry for everything I said. For thinking that your prior commitments were a lack of ambition. I realize now they are the highest form of it, Elias offered a tired, genuine smile. Good night, Sarah. The aftermath of the truth, the gilded lily, was exactly as Sarah had expected, a cacophony of clinking crystal, forced laughter, and the smell of ego. Marcus was there, holding court with the London VP Elena, a woman who looked every bit as sharp and predatory as Sarah had been 3 hours ago. There she is, Marcus shouted, waving Sarah over. The woman of the hour. Where's Thorn? Did he finally decide to join the land of the living, or did he scurry back to his cave? Sarah walked up to the bar, but she didn't order her usual dry martini. She looked at Marcus, then at Elena, and then at the room full of people who knew everything about the market and nothing about the person sitting at the next desk. Elias Thorn is exactly where he needs to be, Sarah said, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the immediate circle. Oh, come on, Sarah, Marcus laughed, oblivious. Don't tell me you're falling for the mystery man routine. He's a dead end, no fire, no drive. Just a guy who does his numbers and leaves. Sarah felt a surge of cold, focused clarity. Marcus, you are a senior partner at this firm because you can close a deal. But Elias Thorn is a man who builds foundations. You think his life is empty? His life is a masterpiece of resilience. He spends his nights doing physical therapy so his daughter can walk. He spends his earnings on surgeries. He turns down your drinks because he made a promise to a 6-year-old girl that he would never be late. That's not a lack of fire. That's a goddamn inferno of character. The circle went quiet. Elena, the London VP, lowered her glass. He has a daughter with special needs? He has a life that would break any 3 men in this room, Sarah said, turning to her, and he does it with a smile that says he wouldn't trade it for all the partnerships in the world. So from now on, no one calls him the monk, no one questions why he leaves at 5. In fact, we're going to start making some changes. The slow thaw of the transformation didn't happen overnight, but the change in Sarah Vane was immediate. Over the following weeks, the 42nd floor became a testing ground for a new kind of corporate reality. Sarah found herself distracted in meetings, not by the numbers, but by the people behind them. She started noticing the junior associate who always looked frayed around the edges because he was caring for an ailing mother, and the lead designer who missed every morning huddle because of childcare gaps. She called Elias into her office on a Tuesday morning. He looked wary, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop for the boss to return and the human to vanish. I'm restructuring the senior analyst track, Sarah said, sliding a folder across the mahogany desk. I'm creating a lead strategist position. It's a higher salary, more autonomy, and it's a remote hybrid role. You'll only need to be in the office 3 days a week. The rest you manage from home, Elias stared at the folder. Sarah, you don't have to do this because of what you saw. I'm not doing it for you. Elias, I'm doing it for the firm, she lied poorly, her eyes softening. But I'm also doing it because I want you to have a chance to breathe. If you have more time, maybe those 1,000 pieces of your heart can start to knit themselves back together. Elias took the folder, his fingers trembling slightly. Why? Because, Sarah said, leaning back, I realize that if I keep pushing people to choose between their souls and their paychecks, eventually they won't have a soul left to give me. And I'd rather have 60% of your time and 100% of your brilliance than have you burn out and disappear. The new normal with the new schedule, the efficient shadow, began to change. Elias didn't just leave at 5. He arrived at 9 with a look of peace instead of panicked calculation. He started bringing Maya to the office on Friday afternoons. At first, the staff was hesitant. They were unused to the sound of a child's laughter or the rhythmic thump hitch of a leg brace in the halls of a multi-billion-dollar firm. But Sarah led by example. She kept a jar of high-end organic lollipops on her desk specifically for Maya. She would pause. $1 million conference calls to listen to Maya explain the plot of a new picture book. One rainy afternoon, Sarah found Elias in the break room, teaching Maya how to use the high-tech espresso machine to make frothed milk clouds. She has another surgery in 3 months, Elias said quietly as Sarah approached. The doctors think this one might finally allow her to walk without the full hip brace. That's incredible news. Elias, Sarah said. It is, but it's also expensive. And it requires 6 weeks of daily rehab. He looked at Sarah, a silent question in his eyes. The position is yours, Elias. The time is yours. Go be with her, Sarah answered before he could ask. The return of the heart 6 months later, the city was gripped by the first real chill of autumn. Elias was at the park, the same one where he had first shared his story. Maya was there too, but the heavy metal brace was gone, replaced by a much smaller, sleeker carbon fiber wrap around her calf. She was standing at the edge of the grass, her walker discarded a few feet away. 1, 2, 3, Maya counted, her little face scrunched in concentration. She took 4 independent steps before her balance wavered. Elias moved to catch her, but a hand reached out from the side first. It was Clara. Clara wasn't a corporate shark or a socialite. She was a physical therapist Sarah had introduced to Elias through a new corporate wellness initiative. She was a woman who understood the language of slow progress. She spent her days helping children find their footing and her nights caring for a father who was slowly losing his memory. Clara caught Maya by the waist, laughing. "Whoa there, world traveler, you almost made it to the pond?" Elias watched them, and for the first time in years, the crushing weight in his chest felt lighter. He looked at Clara, and he didn't see someone who would find his life too much. He saw someone who was already living a life of too much and doing it with a grace that matched his own. "She's getting stronger," Clara said, helping Maya sit on a bench. She looked at Elias, her gaze steady and warm. "And so are you." "I had some help," Elias admitted. "From a very unlikely source, Sarah?" Clara smiled. "She's a force of nature. She told me once that she used to think success was a mountain you climbed alone. Now she thinks it's a village you build together." Elias sat down beside them. For the first time, he didn't check his watch. He didn't think about the next deadline or the next bill. He just watched the way the autumn light caught the gold in Clara's hair and the joy in his daughter's eyes. "Clara," Elias said, his voice hesitant but clear, "there's a sensory-friendly concert at the pavilion next Sunday. Maya loves the violins. I was wondering if you'd like to join us." "Not as a therapist, just, as us." Clara didn't hesitate. She didn't look at the brace or the tired lines on his face with pity. She reached out and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm, real, and grounded. "I'd love that, Elias. I really would. The architecture of a new life." Back at Vane and Associates, Sarah Vane stood in her office. The skyline was still there, but it didn't feel like a cage anymore. She looked at a photo on her desk, not of a trophy or a ribbon cutting, but a candid shot Elias had sent her. It was Maya, standing unassisted on the grass, holding a small flower. Sarah picked up her coat. It was 5:15 p.m. Marcus walked by, his face buried in a tablet. "Sarah, the quarterly projections just came in. We need to go over the downside risks." Sarah didn't even slow down as she headed for the door. "Send them to my email, Marcus. I'll look at them in the morning." "But the partners will still be rich in the morning, Marcus," Sarah said with a sharp, beautiful laugh. "But I have a dinner reservation with a friend I haven't seen in years. And unlike a projection, she's not something I'm willing to postpone." She stepped into the elevator, the same one where Elias had once challenged her to see his reality. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished steel. She looked older, perhaps. There were faint lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when she only cared about the bottom line. But she also looked alive. She had spent her life building a career, only to realize that the most important thing a person can build is a sanctuary for someone else. Elias had broken her heart with his answer that rainy night, but in the breaking he had shown her how to put it back together. Not with gold or steel, but with the quiet, everyday courage of showing up for the people who matter. As she walked out into the cool evening air, Sarah Vane didn't feel like a CEO. She felt like a human being. And as she looked toward the west side, she knew that somewhere in a quiet park, a little girl was taking steps, and a man was finally letting himself be seen. The answer to "Why won't you date?" was no longer a tragedy, it was a testament. And for the first time in his life, Elias Thorne wasn't just surviving. He was home.